Hi, this is Lila with Fern Shadow Studio. I wanted to share with you my new deck of cards that are called Crystal, Wisdom, and Intention cards. They are a result of my 30 years of experience in earth sciences and rock hounding, as well as my 20 plus years in energy work, biofield therapy, Reiki, and integrated energy therapy. I'd like to explain to you 3 of the basic ways you can use these cards, although I'm sure that there are more ways to use them, but these might get you started. So the first way that you can use these cards is for stone and crystal identification. There are about 85 cards in the deck, and they describe over 120 stones. And you'll see that on each card there's photographs of the stones, some of them in the polished and unpolished state, and they are clear and allow you to easily compare them to specimens that you might already have. Some of the cards have more than one stone on them, particularly if the stones are very similar. This is an example of tiger's eye here, but I've included tiger's iron because it's so similar. And I've described at the bottom the differences between the two, so you can also identify them. Another is carnelian, which is very similar to red agate. And the last one I can show as an example here would be celestite and angelite. Often confused, very similar, but there are distinct differences which allow you to identify the difference between those 2 cards. Now, another way that you can use these cards in identification is by the information at the bottom of the card. That information describes some of the details about the card, maybe some minerals it contains, maybe some cautions about how to handle it. Perhaps it fades in the sunlight. But also, they will contain information about ways that a crystal might be imitated, altered, or faked. An example I can show you is this one on citrine. We have a natural citrine there, what it might look like as it was pulled out of nature and cut. But this one is an example of what you might call imitation citrine or altered citrine. Actually, what happens is if you take a purple amethyst and you bake it, it will actually turn yellow. And this is what you most commonly find sold as citrine. The card allows you to easily identify the difference between the 2. So if we continue on with our identification, you're going to notice that in the upper corners of the cards, you see a number. Those numbers represent the hardness of the stone. You might say, why do I need to know the hardness of the stone? Well, that's based basically on the Mohs hardness scale, which is a scale used in science and in rock hounding to identify the hardness of the stones. The ones at the bottom, the ones, are soft stones like chalk and graphite, and at the top are diamonds. And in between are the stones that we have in the cards. An example of when hardness might be interesting to you is identifying the difference between, say, a crystal ball you were gifted. Is it quartz crystal or is it glass? There's a difference between the 2, especially energetically. We also know that quartz is harder than glass, which means that if you wanted to know whether that ball was quartz or glass, you could take a small piece of quartz and put a small scratch on the ball. If it actually scratched, you'd know it was glass. If it didn't, you'd know it was quartz. And there are many other stones that are similar stories where they might appear very close, But if you look at their hardness, one might be much softer than the other, and you could identify the difference. Hardness also gives us a clue of the stones that are going to be most affected by water damage, which would be the stones down here at the bottom of the scale. And then lastly, another way that this hardness might be interesting to you is in how you handle and store your crystals. Because we know that these harder stones are definitely going to damage, scratch, or break the softer stones. So if you put several stones into a pouch and carry them around, these harder ones are going to damage the softer ones. And we'd want to take that into consideration. So we've looked at the different ways that we can use this deck to help you identify all of the stones that are out there. Knowing too that if there are toxic stones, I try not to include those in the deck. For example, galena, which is also known as lead, is not included in this deck, nor is cinnabar, which is also known as mercury. I chose not to include stones that have a lot of asbestos content or sulfur content, because those also require special handling. So if you are interested in a stone, if a stone catches your eye and you don't find it in this deck, I encourage you to do some research and make sure that you know what that stone is composed of and how to handle it safely. So let's move on from here to another way that you can use this deck. And now we're moving into more of the thought of energetically how crystals can affect our bodies. So first, let's understand a little bit about how crystals move energy according to science. So as energy moves through the planes of a crystal can serve as a rectifier, meaning it can change the energy as it moves through it. It may take out some of the waves in the energy wave. It may smooth it out. It may modulate it, amplify or impede that signal. Crystals were used in the original radios. Crystal radios consisted mostly of a piece of rock quartz, a wire, and a speaker. And the quartz captured the radio signals, rectified them so that they could move down the wire to the speaker. And we know that quartz, or we might call it silicon, is used in almost all of the electronic industry now, in motherboards, in our phones, in our computers, and it pretty much runs the world. So there's no question that crystals can have an effect on an energy field. And our body has a large energy field around it called our biofield. So it would make sense that it is possible for a crystal to come into our energy field and to help rectify it, either smooth out the waves, energize us, amplify the waves, or maybe even smooth out a frequency that might be overactive. So if we understand energetically the possibilities of how crystals might have some effect on our biofield, let's talk about how we narrow down and choose which crystal we would want to work with. Every crystal has a slightly different frequency, composition, minerals that it contains, a different pattern, geometric pattern, how the molecules are formed in that stone. If you Google any stone and ask how it will help us energetically, you're going to find a myriad of conflicting information. So what I've tried to do in this deck is to condense down the folklore, the ancient uses, the most common modern uses that are agreed upon, and then combine that with how that particular stone moves energy what its piezoelectric energy and hardness are, the color of the stone. What you find when you start looking at that information is that the colors of the stones very much correlate with the colors assigned to our energy centers in our bodies. The energy centers that are frequently called chakras. And those energy centers serve to take energy from our biofield from around us and move it into our body and into the meridians that flow through our bodies. Now, I've included a card that shows the color key, which are the colors of the chakras, and then I've included some of the emotions or systems of our bodies that are most commonly associated with those colors. And you will see that the deck includes those colors of chakras, as well as white and brown and black, which affect our body more in a universal way, or our biofield overall, versus more specific, pinpointed energy centers. If you look at the cards another way too, you're going to see on this corner either a P or an A. Those represent how the stone moves energy. Does the stone actively move energy? Does it have a lot of piezoelectric energy so it can amplify and move and modulate? Or is it a very passive stone with a low amount of energy that would act more like an energetic sponge, drawing things to it and holding them there? So that active or passive can also give you a clue on how you want that stone to work for you as a tool. So when you take all of that information together, the active or passive qualities of the stone, the color of the stone, the additional minerals that the stone might contain, the geometric patterns the stone forms, the folklore and the traditional ways that it's been used, you will be able to narrow down the choice of the stone that you want to make for your intention. And you'll notice on these cards that I have created an intention that goes with all those factors I just mentioned, and those intentions are listed here in the middle. And every stone has a different type of intention. Some of them might be subtle, but they're all different, and they're based on those qualities that we described. And by reading those intentions, it will help you to determine what stone might be the most useful one for you to work with. And in doing so, you also set your own intention, the intention of the frequency in your biofield. It allows that stone to capture, to connect with that frequency and begin rectifying it. So the intentions serve not only one purpose of helping you decide which stone to choose, but also the purpose of helping you to set an intention to kind of prime the pump and give the stone a frequency to begin rectifying it. And so if we think about that stone needing time to gradually move, to change, to shift in energy, we want to give it some time, at least 3 days. Give it time to be in our energy field. Perhaps you can't wear the stone or carry it on you, so then maybe you'd want to put it on your nightside table. Maybe you want to have it on your desk. If it's a stone, a passive stone like selenite or shungite, perhaps you want to just have it in a space and allow it to work on the energy of a space. You'll notice that in our cards that are more of a universal card, we see things like clear quartz, which is a universal amplifier, but also in that universal group, we're going to see selenite, And these are basically the opposites: extremely active, extremely passive. So now that we know how we want to select a stone to work with, we've identified it, we've selected it, and now let's think about a third way that we might be able to use these cards. Say I was trying to decide what I wanted to focus on for my meditation of the day, or perhaps I was suspecting that I needed to work on an area that needed strengthening. You can use these cards as an oracle card deck, meaning that you can draw a card, randomly shuffle and draw a card, and that card might give you a clue as to an intention that you could think about, meditate on, maybe even work on. Maybe the card is an affirmation for you, for something that you might have suspected. So those are some ways that you can use this deck. I appreciate you letting me share them with you. They're available through my website or through my office location. I also give classes on stones and crystals from beginner to advanced. You can find those on my website also, as well as soon the companion book that goes with the cards. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at my website, fernshadowstudio.com. Bye.